Welcome, everybody, to this Living in the Now series. And today we're going to be talking about Marikan and I. And I see Marikan, you're there. You want to say a quick hello?
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
And so today we want to talk about, the the challenges that sometimes can arise for people who really want to live in the now, who have, maybe you've been watching all these videos and, this really sounds like a great way to live, to really be in that sweet spot of being in presence, being in the now, and having a way um, to embrace all your experiences, emotional thoughts, and really have a practice with it so that you can be experiencing the radiance of who you are. But something came up as we were having our last video session, and that was, well, what happens to people who have had really intense experiences in their lives, and some people may call it trauma, where it really is a challenge for them to get into the space of being in presence. They want to. Maybe this is happening for you, that you want to be in this. You've read the books, and it sounds like this is where you want to be. But there's something that is not allowing you, or a part of you that's maybe not allowing you to connect to that. And first, I just want to say that I want to acknowledge how real that is. I want to acknowledge that if something did happen to you in your life that um, that caused for pieces of you to close down, I just want to give you the space to acknowledge, um, uh, and give yourself kindness to that really rough experience that you've had. So I wanted to talk, especially with Marikan, to kind of uncover what are the experiences that we've had with people who have had intense experiences, and what is the approach? Is it a little bit different than the person who, like, the first time that they do this work, they just like jump in, feel everything, feel their connection to the trees, feel their connection to the air, there's a sensation in their body. But if that's not your experience, then we want to provide a certain, maybe a little bit different approach. So, Marikan, I want to kind of start off, um, have you talk about what you've observed is helpful.
Okay. I think what I liked about your introduction, first of all, is that you talked about intense experiences, because that's really the key. It doesn't really matter whether these experiences are positive or negative. If an experience is too intense for us to assimilate it and integrate it at the moment we have it, then we store some of it, and we have a residue of this experience that we carry with us. And we usually, because it was overwhelming, we keep it in a safe place. So our mind then becomes an instrument to keep that piece, that unintegrated piece, suppressed in our bodies somewhere where we don't feel it. And when it shows up, our mind becomes active to push it back down. So that's really, I think, the key problem that happens when people are trying to go into presence. They begin to feel this unintegrated piece, and a fear response shows up. The mind activates and tries to push it back down. So it's very difficult to hold on to presence for more than a fraction of a second. Like you'll see it, you'll feel it, and boom, it's gone. Sometimes people can, particularly in a facilitated session, hang out there for much longer. But then when they're off on their own and their daily life shows up, the mind comes back and tries to push the stuff down because it's just too uncomfortable. I think often this happens to most of us to some degree. I think we've all had, excuse me, I think we've all had experiences in our life that we couldn't integrate. Um, like I had an experience when I was 3 years old that at that time I couldn't integrate because I didn't have the full picture with my immature mind to be able to understand what was happening to me in context. Now, lucky for me, there was no nobody I could blame for this experience ultimately. So I couldn't blame myself either. So it gave me kind of an opening to let go of the story surrounding it and really enter that experience on dissolving the pain that's underneath it, and letting go of the stories. But if you have a compelling story, which most people do, then those stories are very difficult to let go. And so our mind will get pulled into the story because the story somehow keeps us away from that uncomfortable feeling. And that keeps pulling us out of presence, because what is presence ultimately? Ultimately, presence is inclusion. It is allowing everything. So if there's something we are very invested in not allowing, we cannot maintain presence. So we can only experience presence when that piece isn't triggered. So when there's nothing we're resisting in that moment. But the moment that old trauma gets triggered, presence gets pushed away because we turn away from the old trauma. So that's the dilemma. What do you do? How do you help yourself or another that has that issue?
And this conversation too is, really focused on those who have this really sweet desire to heal, or to be in this inclusion, to really to heal, to be whole. And they know that there's this part that's feeling pain and perhaps and feeling like, well, so first, you talk about how, your mind is really trying to keep that safety net, right? Keep the safety net of this experience being at bay. So one is like, just accept your mind for the job that it's trying to do,
Yes.
and know that there's a sweeter part of you that is wanting from this heart space to be whole and to. So the notion too is that if you can buy into the perspective that experiences are coming into your life, so, and as a way for your system to determine what is it's asking for you to pay attention to, right? So when we bring or when people come into the space of presence, and there's this piece of either like fear comes in, or like feeling like I don't have control here, or I can't feel anything, or it's like very vanilla, like I just feel calm, when like that's another one, right? Like I just feel calm. And even when you're doing this several times, if from my experience, or my intuition is that if all you're feeling is calm, like that's great, that's a wonderful thing, and I also know that there's more. So all of these can be maybe like a little bit of an alert, or a little bit of like, okay, let's pay attention here. There's something that is wanting, as subtle or as intense it may be, to be integrated back.
Yes. Yeah, whatever we've packed away, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think our system just does it. Something's overwhelming, pack some of it away for later. Kind of like a cow eats a lot of grass while it can, but then it needs to kind of regurgitate it and eat it again, to integrate it, to fully digest it. So sometimes an experience is too much for whatever reason to fully integrate in the moment, so some of it gets stored. And it wants to be digested. It wants to be integrated again. So it will keep trying to come up. It will keep trying to get triggered. Whenever it finds an opportunity, it jumps out in front and wants to be experienced. And then the mind, of course, then goes, no, that's not safe. Remember, that wasn't safe, and pushes it back down. So, and this can be for both positive and negative experiences. Like I know a number of people who had premature spiritual experiences, either intense Kundalini experiences or something through using substances, where they all of a sudden maybe took LSD and they had this huge experience that could not be integrated. And then when you bring that person in presence, even though the experience they had was extremely positive, this fear gets triggered, like, what if I get lost there again? in this amazing place, but it's too big and I can't handle it. So it doesn't have to be a negative experience. It can be any experience that was too intense. But most of us, most of the time we're dealing with negative childhood trauma experiences. And I think, especially if it's a childhood trauma, you can get some space to allow yourself to learn to trust that you can handle this experience now by seeing that when you were a child, you were an immature being. Your physiology wasn't developed. Your brain, your nervous system wasn't fully developed. So children are their nervous systems are much more easily overwhelmed than an adult nervous system. However, you have this memory of I can't handle this, and you have carried that into your adulthood. So part of it is recognizing, yes, at that time it was overwhelming, and your subconscious has, you've given your mind or your ego the job to keep you from feeling this because it was too much. But you're not a child anymore. So as an adult, let's play with this and see if maybe you can handle it, so that this thing can come to the surface. We can, parent it. We can bring love and kindness to it. We can hold it in presence, and we can see what it wants to do. And then it usually something happens, and people can actually be in presence with it. And once somebody recognizes that they can have this and still be in presence, the fear of this experience slowly goes away. But we need patience. Yeah. And if the trauma happened in adulthood, then it may just be a matter of, and that could be for childhood as well, but particularly for adulthood, maybe we just need to digest it one bite at a time. Mm-hmm. So, you just let up as much as is comfortable, maybe in a session with somebody where you're safe to let it come up and you can sit and feel into it together. Let it integrate. And then, go back to your coping mechanisms until you have another safe place where you can bring up a little bit more and let it integrate. And so that then becomes a process of being kind to yourself, coping when coping is necessary, and allowing some of the releasing when there is a space for releasing and a safe space for releasing. And that's practicing compassion, both by conventional coping mechanisms and by spiritual presence ways.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about having sort of these, longer term relationship with clients is that because I have such a deep trust in this process, and this knowing that the more that we can drop into that sense of connection to ourselves completely and the all, it doesn't have to be like, well, that didn't work for me, and then they go away, right? Like they go away, and then I'm like, no, there's more here, I promise. So there can be this kind of like long, this relationship, and in part of being in the relationship, that trust begins to also integrate, right? Because if there's something that our system's not wanting to feel, there's this lack of trust that we can handle. It's a lack of trust in ourselves, lack of trust in others, lack of trust in experiences, and having this sort of like continuous relationship with someone that can help facilitate allows for the bite-sized pieces to take place. Yes. Allow for the pacing to take place, right?
Yes. And that builds trust again. That builds trust again every time you have a little success. And it reduces the fear of entering that space and being with your traumatic sensations, whatever shows up. When you recognize each time, oh, I didn't die. Actually, I felt really good afterwards. Actually, I started feeling really good in the midst of it. That slowly you're teaching your conscious mind, you no longer need to protect me against this. It's actually safe for me to go here.
Yeah.
So in time, that trust gets rebuilt, because in a sense, in a heavy, traumatic, or intense experience, the trust that we can handle something is broken. And it's very easy and quick to break trust, but it doesn't necessarily, it takes much longer to rebuild trust, in relationships and also in our inner relationships.
Yeah, and tell me if you find this to be true. I've had some clients where we that there may be this piece of not feeling fully safe with feeling the connection at the beginning, and so it's kind of been a gradual space. And when it feels right to have them almost take the reins, right? Like it's not about supporting, bringing somebody up, teaching them some concepts to be able to have this practice. But I found that when I allowed them to, or I invited them rather to take ownership of it and actually bring me into presence, that something shifted. Yes. Because they had the tools, we had been learning, and then they took ownership of it. And there was something very empowering about them taking command and them creating that space for us in community. What have you found with that as a way to kind of I don't know, I found it like almost as a like things went in a completely different direction, where it was like, okay, first we kind of like holding hands, teaching, the neural pathways are forming as we do this, and then boom, they get the free reins with it, and their energy just completely shifted in a direction of total integration, of really like trusting their system to move into this healing process.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I find that in my own experience. I mean, why do we do this work? Part of it is that when we do this work, we can become incredibly empowered, and we feel presence really, really deeply. And it's much easier to get into a much stronger flow when you are doing it for somebody else. Yeah. So there is something about, expanding beyond yourself and doing something for the benefit of another person that is a very powerful transforming energy for the person who's doing the facilitation. So absolutely, I think I always want to encourage people to, once you know how to enter presence, if you have difficulty entering presence, because maybe something is triggered, do the work, whatever you can, but also reach out to somebody else and either, have somebody bring you into presence, but better yet, you go and bring someone else in. Have a buddy, and say, hey, when I'm struggling, can I call you and bring you into presence? Mm-hmm. Yes, that works. That is very powerful.
So what I'm sort of kind of like recapping some of what we've said is, if people, if they know, if there's a known intense experience that they've had, whether it's childhood or adulthood, to bring compassion to themselves, to understand that it's a trust, moving into rebuilding trust for themselves and the world in general. And then also, when they get to a place where they're able to really feel this place of connection, this place of being in the now, by inviting others into it, it strengthens us for them and empowers them. Mm-hmm. What have you ever had the experience that somebody has had a challenging time? There's sort of this hesitation, or something's is stopping them from moving into presence, and they can't think of any kind of intense experience that they've had.
I'm sure that must have happened. I think because many of the early childhood experiences, or if that's part of your paradigm, past lives or whatever, is not in our conscious memory. So our conscious mind can't remember it. And I also have people that I work with who don't remember much of their childhood, which can be a big red flag right there, that something has been compartmentalized, moved outside of the conscious arena. So even if we don't remember having intense experiences, our birth experience was intense, believe me.
Right.
We've all had intense experiences. So, and it's not important to know what caused this discomfort to happen. The only thing that is important is to allow this discomfort, to meet it with kindness, and to let it do what it needs to do so it can integrate and come back into resonance with the whole. And once we are in that flow, we can also, we have this access to what some people may call higher vibrations, or I like to call them inclusive feelings. That love, appreciation, gratitude, these warm kindness, compassion, these frequencies that include all the other ones that can coexist with all the lower, and I hate the words higher and lower, but for lack of a better, and that's what most people use. So one of the problems I think I have found is that a lot of people that have trouble staying in presence carry with them a lot of shame and lack of self-respect that they were conditioned to feel as they became, victims of abuse or had whatever other difficult experiences as they were growing up. And part of the power of, meeting with a facilitator is that they can begin to open up and become honest and authentic about these things, and see that they're not being judged, and see that there is somebody there that is actually deeply respecting them and their process, and that is actually maybe even honoring them in that process that they have felt embarrassed about carrying. And that gives a lot of space and freedom to begin to become more of themselves, to begin to show more of themselves in their lives, and to begin to notice that, as harshly as they're judging themselves, nobody else is judging them in that way. Mm-hmm. That was a created reality that they were taught, but that was not something they were born with. So yeah. when you sit with somebody who can really see you, the real you, and who can honor you for the courage that you were able to survive these experiences, and that you actually came here, incarnated, allowing for these experiences, whether it was on purpose or not on purpose. Nevertheless, the courage of surviving that is worthy of admiration. So when somebody who's never felt that respect and admiration, especially for that part of their life, it opens up, again, it's about that trust that you're talking about. It opens up a trust that they're willing to become vulnerable. Because presence ultimately is vulnerability. It is about being open to everything. And if you have had to defend your heart a lot, then that space of vulnerability doesn't feel safe. So part of it is seeing that you can show these parts of yourself that are really deeply buried, that you haven't shown anybody, that you're ashamed of, to somebody who doesn't judge you, who honors you for that journey, can be very empowering.
Yeah, one of the most powerful experiences I had was, I sort of had a more critical kind of mind, and a few years ago, it was like 2008, I started this project of interviewing women. And actually, even after the first interview that I did, it was like all judgment from my system fell off, or at least 90% of it, because what I found was that by me creating space for somebody to feel heard, not in conversation, right? Because sometimes we can be in conversation, but there's sort of the cultural in conversation where you kind of interrupt a little bit, you kind of agree with something they say, or have a little discussion on the side. But when you are in total silence, when somebody is speaking their experience, it is so transformative to be in that space. For me, as a person who was hearing this, who was hearing these beautiful powerful stories and sometimes very intense stories, was beautiful to see the person in front of me um, just being so grateful for being heard. And I've had intense experiences in my parenting, and and one of the models of this collaborative problem solving that we engaged in early on was so opening for me to realize that my daughter just wanted to be heard without being interrupted. And I mean, that's profound, right? Like that
Yes.
is profound. If we just sit and listen to people, and this is not just about you and I, this is about all of us, right? If all of us will just allow space to truly listen to people, truly listen to ourselves even, right? Really listen to for the stories and the intensity of the experiences that we've had, sometimes that can be the door that
Yes.
allows for everything to be integrated back to that sweet desire that you have to be whole. Like, that you don't want to be in this suffering of thinking about this thing that happened or not happened, or why am I not feeling in the moment? Why am I having a hard time? Why am I in my head? If you can stop and just really honor yourself um, for the path that you've been in, and really listen even to yourself. It's of course it's sweeter when you can have somebody else really witness you, but this is definitely a gift that you can offer yourself. There's so much transformation and such an opening that can happen from that place.
Yes. And the other thing I want to add to that is when you sometimes, there's so much shame around the stories that we carry that we are not willing to tell them. Or there's so much trauma attached to them that we're not willing to tell them. And, we don't need to know the story. If you can get to the feeling by thinking about the story, you don't have to speak it out loud. We can work directly on the core that is keeping you from being able to be in the now, because to be in the now we don't need a story. So you can work with presence without having to share your story if you don't want to. So it's not like, maybe other modalities where maybe in therapy where it's all about talking about your story, which is useful at times. I have nothing against it. And if and sharing your story can be, like we said earlier, extremely powerful. Sometimes people are not willing to share their story, and that's not a problem, because the ultimate answer is not in the story, it is in what's underneath the story. It's in what's feeding the story. Because ultimately it is about seeing what's real and what's virtual. And even though something happened in the past that was real, your story about it now is not real, it's virtual. And it's freezing something in place that is real, and that is what's happening in your system. That is the sensations that you're not willing to feel that are coming up to be integrated, to reconnect you, to make you whole again, to allow you to live in presence. These disowned parts of ourselves need to be reintegrated in order to be able to stay in presence, because presence is about inclusion. It's about letting everything in.
So just to kind of to recap on what you just said, because it's really important, this piece about shame or shame, or the story around, the story behind the story, that it can keep us from kind of coming out with our realness. That it's less important for us to voice what the actual experience was, but it's more important for the person to just kind of tune into that vibration of just the experience. Yes. And then from that place, as long as you're sensing those sensations without attaching a story about it, that it's like there's shame with this, or this sensation brings me sadness. Like even labeling the sensation with a sadness or anger or whatever keeps us in a not flowing model, right? Like it keeps us in I don't know if you called it static, but that's sort of the word that I got when you said that. It keeps us in this frozen space without flowing with it.
Yes, exactly. And so for me, when I work with people, the story is totally unimportant to me. The story, it only needs to be told to the degree in which the feeling that's underneath the story can be triggered. So usually people come for help because this thing is triggering all the time and they want help with it. So sometimes they don't need to tell me any story because they're on the phone, they're already triggered, because that's the intention they came on there. I want to work on this. So I don't need the story then. If you want to tell it, sure, because sometimes it just wants to be told, and that's perfectly fine. But ultimately, the answers and the resolution doesn't happen in the story. It happens because the story is not, while the story is happening in the now, the story is about something that's not now. The story is, but the sensations, the body, that experience is happening now. And that is what can be integrated. Then what happens is when that integrates, let's say that we're working with somebody and this has completely shifted. Whatever discomfort was showing up in the body is completely shifted. Now I have them tell the story again. The story no longer triggers anything. It no longer feels real to them. So the memory can be there, but there's no more that charge to the story, and so the story no longer is compelling. It can no longer rule you. Now, usually, for most people, the first time something releases, it doesn't release all of it. Only the piece that was triggered can release. So it doesn't mean the story will never be compelling again. But in the moment when the release has happened and there's this space and this freedom and this sense of oneness inside, we can bring the story back, and the space does not get affected by there's no energy that is triggered by the story in that moment. Then you know that everything that could be released in that moment has been released or integrated or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So there can be, and every person, every system, I call it, is so unique, right? So
yes.
if you're, watching this and you feel like, okay, I don't know if I have some kind of intense experience, but there's this thing, just if you can just jump into curiosity, because your system may be wanted to have a gradual process with it, or your system may just open up the gates and feel it all. And that's also, another possibility too, that it could be baby steps, and boom, it just it starts flowing. You start really getting what it feels like to bring this into, wholeness. But it can also be that if all these years, right, if you're 30-something, 40-something, 50-something, 20-something even, and you've been living a certain way and you've been kind of programmed to deal with your experiences and your sensations in one way, that this kind of work can kind of open things up very quickly too. And I mean, it's the same thing. Just have patience with this, have compassion for this, and know that sometimes the system just says oh my gosh, you finally are letting me express all of this. Let me just go wild here. So what do you do, Marieke, and how do you what do you have to share with people if that's the way that things go?
I don't know if I've experienced things going wild. I think generally there is an intelligence in our system that allows, if we're in this trust space, if we're in presence, if we're allowing. I have never found that the more came up than I could contain, and when it does, it shuts down. It shuts itself down. You leave presence. You get into stories. You suppress what is too much. It's a pretty intelligent system, and I think anything that's worth That is not, it's not sort of a bypass, and that ultimately we can't bypass because whatever we bypass is going to show up again. It does take time. It is about integrating, and it's not. It's all about what doesn't take time is that the end goal is not something in the future. The end goal is to be in the journey, whatever the journey is showing. So that piece doesn't take time. But the piece of unfoldment of life takes time. And it takes that is happening for everybody. You and me are continuously learning, continuously growing, continuously being faced with new opportunities. We just know how to enter it in this moment and how to open up to it. And neither one of us, I'm sure, is perfect at it. We get caught up and we lose it for a moment, and then we become aware, oh, wait a minute, I'm stuck in this little funnel here. Let's go back to what's real. Let's go back to presence. Let's go find what's happening in the body right now that I'm trying to avoid. So this is not a process that is ever going to end. But it's a beautiful process once you recognize that there is no end goal in the future. The end goal is to continuously return to the now, continuously turn to the journey as it is happening in this moment. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah, when we choose to be in the now, which is, the whole topic of this series is living in the now, and all the beautiful real experiences and sensations that we get to have, and that our system gets to communicate with us through everything that unfolds, from whether it's somebody bringing this up or whether it's our own system bringing it up. That's really the sweet spot, is being in the now. Anything else that you want to say for people who find a resonance in intense experiences in their lives and moving into the now?
Patience and kindness, and get help when you need help. But patience and kindness, and curiosity. Be curious, and curiosity is really about what's real right now. What's real right now, and what is just the mind spinning to keep me from experiencing what's real. And what it actually does, it's counterproductive. It freezes what you don't want into place. So see what it is that you don't want. What am I not wanting to experience right now? And just feel into it to the degree that you can. Don't force it. Don't try to, it doesn't all have to be gone at once. Just allow yourself to open up a little bit to what's there and be curious about it and see what happens. And again, the more you do this, the more trust you build, the more you can open up to this moment. And the more you open up to this moment, the more presence you'll experience. The more access you have to the higher vibrations of love, compassion, gratitude, appreciation, and joy. You have access to those feelings to the degree that you're willing to feel everything, including what we call shame and guilt and anger and sadness and depression and all those other things. But if you drop the words, but connect to them as energies, then you see that shame is actually ultimately a form of love. That all of these are included, and then something beautiful happens. That it's not something you can really describe, because then it becomes, just a concept again. So it is about experiencing and beginning to trust that it's safe to experience, because that's what happens when we have trauma or overly intense experiences in our life. What we learn is it's not safe to experience, and that's what puts us in our head. So we need to relearn and show our conscious mind that it's safe to experience, so that it can let go of its job of gatekeeper and keeping us away from actual experience, because that's where life happens, is in actual experience, not in our heads. So that's the invitation that I want to put out there, is, meet your experience as openly as you can, with as much kindness and patience and curiosity as you can.
Yeah, I second the curiosity, because the curiosity just brings this place of wonder, you know, and
Yes.
and we can just be in wonder of our system. I think that's the most incredible experience of being in the now, is when we can just be in wonder of, wow, like all this happens in this like little body. Um,
Yes.
it's pretty amazing and incredible.
It
Um,
is.
and that and that the system has like built all these ways of being able to manage it, and when we can just drop into just the experience, it's
Yes.
so simple, but yet so ridiculously profound
It
to
is. It's amazing. I just want to add to this piece that you're talking about is this is what is curiosity? Curiosity is not accepting any answer. Yeah, so if your mind is saying, "Oh, I'm so sad," if you accept that as an answer, you stop being curious.
yes.
Yeah, so instead saying, well, what is curious? What is that sadness? What does that mean, sad? What am I actually feeling right now? That is curiosity. And then maybe the mind goes, well, blah, 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 this happened and that happened to you and you're depressed. Well, is that true? What am I really feeling? What does this depressed mean? What am I feeling? Oh, that's depressed is just a word. What I'm feeling is something alive that's in my body. So curiosity is about not taking, not being satisfied with any words,
Hmm.
always going into actual experience. That the word is trying to describe. Because as soon as we believe that we're sad, now we have this concept: we're sad, and it's either right or it's wrong, or it's justified or it's unjustified. It says something good about me or it says something bad about me, depending on how we interpret the word. But in the end, we've basically said, okay, I understand what I'm feeling, and I'm going to stick it on the shelf. You're no longer investigating it. You're no longer really experiencing it. You have defined it, and you think you know it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've been sad before. This must be like that. No, it's unique this time. It's alive. It's real. It's amazing. Go feel it, because it's
Yeah.
not like before. It's uniquely now, and that is the power of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is my hope that this has provided you, if you're watching this, with a different approach, or maybe a softer approach, or a certain understanding of how you can work with living in the now, with your system, and all the experiences, past or current experiences that you've had, and how you can bring the sort of place of gentleness and kindness and compassion to your own path. Um, and as always, Marikan and I are here to support people. This is why we have put these videos together, to invite you into a deeper curiosity of yourself. One of the things that one of my teachers says is that when you're real, he says when you're real, God shows up, but it can be when your real presence shows up, or the presence of God, or whatever whatever that means to you. It shows up when we're real, not when we're pretending, and not when we're running away, or not when we're in stories, but when we can really drop into our sense of connection to who we are, completely. Marikan, anything else that you want to say in closing?
No, it feels pretty complete. Just know that you're on the right path, and you'll get there. You'll get there. You just trust that you can do this. You can integrate these traumatic experiences. It's possible. There are people out there on many different modalities that are helping in that helping profession. So find somebody that you resonate with to help you if you need it, or practice these things on your own if you have already a lot of spiritual practice, or psychological work that you've already done, so that you feel safe, exploring this on your own. That's also very possible. And then, of course, both you and I have many resources we offer on our websites. So I would encourage you to explore those and see what resonates with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Marieke, so much for being a part of this series and for your incredible wisdom and your experience. And thank you for those of you who have made the choice to watch this, and have an amazing day.
Same to you, Asha. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.